Hi everyone, thanks for joining us again. This is now week 3. I feel like my background changes every time we do this. So if you've been following along, I have been switching things up with every broadcast because I just moved here. So I currently live in Montreal, Quebec, and hello from here. And so I am shuffling things around all the time over here, but so happy if you are joining us today, whether you joined for the last 3 weeks or not, it doesn't matter. I'll always do a quick little review as well before we get started on today's recipe. So today's recipe is a bulletproof coffee. And I know it sounds a little bit strange or abstract, so I'm going to explain what that is in case you don't know. I talked about this on my Instagram yesterday, so if you follow along on my Instagram page, I was asking you guys, what do you know about Bulletproof coffee? What do you want to know? So I got a ton of questions that I will try to plug away with while we are doing today's broadcast. So to reintroduce myself, if you are just joining us for the first time, my name is Marjan. I am a holistic nutritionist and I live and work in Montreal, Quebec, and I work online actually. So I see nutritional clients from all over the world over Skype or FaceTime or any type of video service where I can chat with them from the comfort of their own home. So one of the things that I specialize in is blood sugar balance. So I'm going to be explaining over the course of the last couple of weeks I've done this, and as we continue with this series, I will always plug in a blood sugar balancing tip as part of the recipe, because ultimately all of the recipes that we've gone through so far, despite the fact that they were all super, super simple, were actually in some way contributing to your blood sugar balance for the long term, which is ultimately what we want. So today's recipe, like I mentioned, is a bulletproof coffee. I'm making a caffeinated regular coffee. If we have enough time at the end, I'm also going to make a no caff coffee. So this recipe doesn't just have to be with coffee. It can be with a tea, it can be with a hot chocolate, it can be with a matcha latte, whatever you want to do with it. So once we get the concept down, then we can add it to anything else. So I have my coffee in my French press. You can brew your coffee literally however you like. So if you are joining us today and you are going to be making the recipe as we go along, there is only really 2 ingredients. I have a ton of ingredients on the table right now, but I will show you what all those are for. But really we only need 2 ingredients: your coffee brewed the way that you want, a cup to put your coffee in, and a fat source of your choice. So what we had listed before this broadcast was different types of fats that you could add to a bulletproof coffee. Today I am using a coconut oil. Some people like to use grass-fed butter. In that case, it wouldn't be dairy-free, but that is your choice. If that's your preference, you can go with that. Or some people use cacao butter. So that's from the actual cacao bean itself. There's an actual butter on the inside, if you didn't know. And that can be purchased at a health food store. So that's kind of a fun alternative as well too, because it kind of has a chocolatey flavor to it as well. So if that's something you want to add, you can do that too. So as I am going to go through the recipe, which again is only 2 ingredients, so I'm going to try to answer your questions that I received from Instagram. But if you have any questions as well too, as we're going along, you guys can type them in the comment box and I will see if I can get to them. So I am just pressing my coffee here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, instead of pour it directly into a cup, I'm going to put it into my blender cup. So if you have just a regular blender at home, that works as well too. And we are going to eventually blend this recipe, or these ingredients, I should say. So 3 reasons why somebody would be gravitating towards this type of recipe is, number 1, it can be made dairy-free. So I know a lot of people are looking to reduce the amount of dairy they eat, or maybe you are following a vegan lifestyle. And with that, you want to find some ways to maybe drink your coffee or your tea that isn't just straight black. I personally do not ever drink my coffee black, and that is just my personal preference. So if that works for you, that's awesome. That is obviously dairy-free as well too. But something that a lot of people enjoy doing is adding in some sort of fat source that is our dairy substitute of sorts. So this recipe today is going to be dairy-free. If you're using grass-fed butter, then it's not dairy-free. But again, that is your preference. You can add grass-fed butter if that's what you prefer. And so we have our oil in here. The other benefit of this is that this recipe is completely sugar-free. So all you see in this cup, and you literally saw me adding these ingredients in, is my coffee and an oil or a butter source that I'm putting in here. And so when something is sugar-free like this, it actually makes it blood sugar balancing and diabetic friendly as well too. So if that's something that you are working towards for health purposes or just for general feel-good purposes, this might be a really good recipe to try. And I am also such a cream and sugar type of person before I discovered this recipe. So if you're that person as well too, then this is going to be your best friend, basically, because what's going to happen to this recipe is once we blend this all together, it's actually going to form kind of a latte of sorts. Has anyone actually ever tried this recipe before? If you're also doing the recipe right now, you can let me know in the comment section. So I'm going to blend it. This is all very secure system. It is a hot beverage, so you really want to be careful. If you are using a regular blender, you want to maybe put your hand on top of it just to make sure we don't have any accidents on the top end. So I'm going to quickly just blend this up. It doesn't normally take that long. I just kind of let it go a little bit longer than normal. So if you can remember what the color of it looks like beforehand, it used to look very black, right? It used to look just like coffee. And now it kind of looks like we added cream and sugar to it, which we did not. So the magic of blending it. So what happens when you blend a fat source is it froths up. It kind of just bubbles up. And if you follow along on my Instagram, you know that I am in love with frothy coffees. I usually show off my frothy coffee in the mornings. And so basically what I would do now is just add it to my favorite cup. Today here in Montreal is a very gloomy, snowy, cozy kind of day. So if you're having that type of day as well too, this is the perfect drink to have for that. So one of the reasons why we would want to use a fat source in our coffee. This is a kind of a relatively new concept that came about, but there are many benefits to it, but one of the main benefits would be blood sugar balance. So basically what we consume day to day, a lot of what we consume ultimately breaks down into sugar. And so what we want to do is actually start adding more balance of nutrients into our plates so that our blood sugar balances out a little bit more for the long term. One of the things that does not break down into sugar is fats. So fats include things like coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, avocados. I forgot to show you guys this at the beginning, so I'm just gonna stop the broadcast here and just focus on this. I received this as a gift recently, and it's a little avocado mug. It's very difficult to drink out of, so I'm not using it for my coffee today because the handle is kind of tilted on the side, but for aesthetic purposes, and because we're talking about fats today, I decided to bring this along with me. So basically, because fats do not break down into sugar, we want to start adding more fats to help stabilize our blood sugar for the long term and for hormonal benefits as well too. So one of the things that happens inside the body is when our bodies are producing hormones, they actually require fat sources to be able to produce those hormones. So that's one of the reasons, or I guess those are two of the reasons, why we would want to start adding fat into our meals. What I'm going to do now, as I explain the rest of the benefits, is I'm actually going to make a caffeine-free version. So I know a lot of you guys asked me on Instagram, what about if I don't drink coffee? Then should I not even bother with this recipe? It might be a fun alternative just to try bulletproofing your teas or your no-calf coffees. So I have here a no-calf coffee, and no-calf basically means that the original thing that they use to make the coffee, like dandelion or chicory root, doesn't have any caffeine to begin with. So it's not a decaf coffee, it's a no-calf coffee. So same kind of concept. What I do with my no-calf coffees, and if anyone wants to know where you can get a no-calf or a good decaf coffee, I would go to a health food store near you. If you live in the southwestern Ontario area, goodness me, is my favorite place to go to get basically everything. They were always my one-stop shop when I used to live in that area. And so basically what I do with my no-calf coffees, you can do the exact same thing as what we just did, which is just add an oil to it. But what I like to do with these no-calf coffees is I like to kind of turn it into a hot chocolate of sorts. So I'm actually going to add cocoa powder to this. And if you were following along with us last week, cocoa powder is actually sugar-free. So once again, we're not adding any more sugar to this. We are just adding something that's a fun flavor. So you can do this with your regular coffee as well too. And if you do need a little bit more sweetness, I recommend a natural sweetener. I have vanilla here, or maple syrup. Real maple syrup is considered a natural sweetener. I'm not going to add anything to this. I think it's fine the way that it is, but those are some alternatives if that's what you want to add. Some people also like to add a protein source to their mixture. Again, because we're blending it all together, and as you saw, it turned into kind of a latte of sorts, you can really add anything that suits your fancy. So if you like cinnamon, for example, add in some cinnamon. If you want to add a protein source and make this more of kind of your first meal of the day or something to kind of keep you going for a little bit longer, a protein source that I would get from a health food store is also a good idea to mix in there. And now we are going to add, just like we did with our regular coffee, we are going to add a teaspoon. So I add about this much. You can add more if that's what you are looking for, but just a little bit goes a long way because as you saw, it really froths up with just a little bit of oil. So I've also had people ask me what happens if I don't have a blender. Something you want to invest in is either a magic bullet, or if you go to one of those kitchen type stores, oftentimes you'll find one of those little handheld battery operated blenders. The reason why you want that specifically for this recipe, you can't see this right now, but when you look at your blender from the top down, you'll see that the oil will just sit on top. That doesn't taste very good and doesn't feel very good either. So you don't really get the same concept unless you really blend it and it froths up. So that's answering the broad question that's out there. If you don't have a blender and you want to try this recipe, a cheaper alternative would be to get one of those handheld ones. You can try really shaking it up, but ultimately you do need a blender for this kind of recipe. So again, I'm making this one no calf. I got my no calf dandelion coffee from a health food store. So any health food stores that you have around your area, you can go and check out what they have. And so basically, same as before, I'm blending this up. If you missed it, I also added cocoa powder to this just to kind of make it a little bit more flavorful, add that chocolate, and I'm going to blend it up again. So exact same thing, because we added that fat source into it, it kind of frothed it up so that it turned into a bit of a latte. So some of you were asking me on Instagram if I would recommend this as a way to start the day if you're intermittent fasting. So when we look at blood sugar balance, because fat doesn't break down into sugar, something that it does is it actually helps to satiate us for a little bit longer. And it also helps to balance our blood sugar for the long term. So a lot of times people do drink something like this in the mornings as kind of a pre-breakfast. I wouldn't recommend it as a meal because it doesn't have all of the components of a meal and it doesn't have all of the components of blood sugar balance in it. But a lot of people don't like to have a breakfast first thing in the morning, and that is totally okay. That goes back to listening to your body. So if you are listening to your body and you're not super hungry first thing in the morning, that is okay. This can be something to start with, kind of soothe your digestive system, give you stable enough energy so that you're not going up and crashing down because there's no sugar in this. So that might be an alternative for you, whether you're intermittent fasting or you're like me and you don't necessarily like to have a breakfast first thing in the morning. This might be a good alternative. So to review with all of what we did, so what I did first and foremost is I made a regular Bulletproof coffee. It's in here in this cup. So all I did was take a regular coffee, however you want to brew it. If you have a Keurig at home, that works as well too. Brew your coffee. You're going to add it to a blender. I have a magic bullet. And you're going to take an oil of your preference. So that includes butter, preferably grass-fed butter, so it's more clean. And I used I used a virgin coconut oil today. So I added a teaspoon of oil and blended it all up. If you wanted a caffeine-free option, we talked about making a no calf drink or kind of a hot cocoa type drink, and exact same concept. So you're going to take an oil or a butter of your choosing, stir it in, blend it up, and it'll froth up for you. The last point that I want to make is, if you had joined us in the very first week, and it's okay that if you didn't, but something that happens a lot of times is when we add a lot of fat sources to our meals, which fats are actually healthy for us. We do need a certain amount of fat for hormonal balance and for blood sugar balance, just like we talked about. But a lot of times, because we're just not used to digesting a lot of fats, our North American diets tend to be very sugar or carbohydrate based. Something that you really, really want to be mindful of is making sure that your digestive system is communicating to you and letting you know whether this type of fat addition is working for you right now or maybe not so much. If you're finding that you're experiencing digestive problems because of adding a fat source in, it doesn't matter how healthy something is deemed to be. The way that health works is not to push through anything. If you're feeling bloated or nauseous because of drinking something like this in the mornings, you really, really want to pay attention to that. So we never, ever want to just push through something just because it's a trend. Something that you want to do if you are experiencing some of those digestive difficulties that come with fat breakdown is, first and foremost, you want to stop drinking this type of beverage, but you really want to go back to that very first video, the very first week of January, where I talked about adding a lemon or a lime or apple cider vinegar to a cup of warm water in the mornings. What that does is it creates stomach acid. Stomach acid helps to break down our foods, breaking down those fat sources. And then after we've worked on our digestion a little bit, you want to maybe reintroduce this and see how you feel. But we never ever want to push through with anything, because ultimately our bodies are communicating with us. So if our bodies are telling us that, hey, we feel bloated and we feel gross, then we don't want to continue with that. So definitely go back to the first video if you missed that one, where we talked about digestion and how important digestion is for basically all of this. So today, what we did was make a bulletproof coffee, and basically, I hope that you guys will start playing around with your own bulletproof coffees. If you don't follow me on Instagram, please do. It's at Healthy by Marjan, and basically, I will be making stuff like this all the time. I'm really, really interested and passionate about blood sugar balance. And this is something that ultimately will help to balance our blood sugar for the long term. So if you have any other questions about that, please follow along on Instagram and you guys can DM me any of your questions. And I really, really hope that you guys do try this recipe and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.